Yes. Welcome. I know. Little bit of a different attire that I have on today for those of you who have returned to the show. For those of you who do not know, this is the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast, and I am your host, Asif Body. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different as we have a little bit of an injury report to gut through here today. And I brought out the white coat as when I am not behind the microphone and when I'm not on camera, I'm in pursuit of pursuing a medical degree called a doctorate. Yes, and in a few months' time, I shall be Dr. Asif Body. Isn't my, you know what's so big? My feet size. Huge. Oh, Lord have mercy. Anyway, all joking aside, this is the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. I'm your host, Asif Body, like I said, okay? And I mentioned before, different type of episode today, injury report update, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about the game, what it means with some of these injuries, and how we can, how we're going to sustain against the Bucs. But this is more of a long-term thinking type of deal here, okay? And I kind of want to, attack this a little bit differently because we saw some pretty nasty injuries on Sunday against the Saints, which, by the way, New Orleans Saints, some Bush League stuff out there. Some dirty-ass stuff from a team that's a professional football team. You got the play on Darius Slay that was dirty where he kept driving him into the sideline, and that's great and all in high school when you're young and reckless and, you're driving a guy 15, 20 yards down the field. That's phenomenal. But you're a damn professional. These people got families. You have a family, and you're driving a player into the bench. You almost broke the guy's knee. Could have torn something in his knee and compromised his season. Compromised potentially future money he may get. So that was a very dirty thing to do. And then we all saw the hit on Devonta Smith. The high-low hit when clearly he was giving up yard. Like he stopped forward progress. He wasn't fighting for extra yardage. And they basically sandwiched the guy. And then after that, when he's on the floor, he gets another shot by another player. And the refs are sitting there not blowing their damn whistle. And people want to say it's not a dirty hit because the Saints were just playing till the whistle. Give me a break. It was a dirty play, dirty hit from an organization from its past has done a lot of dirty things. Okay? And quite frankly, that dirty play on Devonta Smith is going to cost him some time as he became concussed in that game. Okay? And then we all know Lane Johnson suffered a concussion, and that's a little bit more of the serious side of concussions, which we'll kind of get down to in a little bit. But we're going to go down the injury list just a bit from three guys, okay? We're going to talk about A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Lane Johnson, okay? The other guys on the injury list, like Mekhi Becton, Darius Slay, Britton Covey. Britton Covey's injury, we know he's going to be out for 6 weeks because he broke a bone in his shoulder. Bones take 6 to 8 weeks to heal anyway. So we're not going to see him for some time, okay? Which probably means in the return game, you're going to see Will Shipley. You may see Cooper DeJean possibly. You may even see Isaiah Rodgers make a sighting, depending on how his hand is feeling, okay? I personally think you're going to see Isaiah Rodgers out there because he's not asked to cover. He's not asked to do anything special like tackling. He's going to be asked to catch the ball, try to make a big play. And we've seen in his career past, he's been a good return man, made some dynamic plays in punt returns and kick returns. So I think that's kind of be the direction that at least I would go if I'm the Philadelphia Eagles. Mekhi Becton against the Bucs. I know he hurt his hand against the Saints, hurt his finger. He's going to wear a cast. Okay, so he's going to try to tough it out. He's going to play against the Saints. I mean, not the Saints. He's going to play against the Bucs with a cast on his finger. And then Darius Slay was a full participant in practice today. His knee seems fine. Nothing too crazy happened after that play. So thank goodness for his health. Thank goodness he's not, in bad shape. And we hope that whoever did sustain injuries in this game makes a speedy recovery. All right. So let's talk about it now. Let's talk about the first injury, the less serious injury, and at least in the grand scheme of things. I'm going to talk about A.J. Brown. Okay. We know he suffered a hamstring injury, prior to the Atlanta game, and he didn't play against the Saints. He didn't play against Atlanta, right? So it's been 2 weeks now. We haven't seen AJ Brown play. And if it's considered just a hamstring strain, which, from all accounts, it seems to be a hamstring injury. They're not really getting into details. Just to give you a little bit of a idea, the hamstring injuries, common in athletes, common in anybody who runs, common in football players, okay? With a lot of cutting, a lot of jumping, a lot of bursting, right? The good thing is that, in terms of muscle imbalances that usually get caused by hamstring injuries or that cause hamstring injuries, AJ Brown, a workout warrior with the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a pretty good strength and conditioning program over there. I'm not too concerned that it's a matter of muscle imbalance that caused this injury. Okay, sometimes it's just wear and tear, and these things just happen. However, they haven't really been clear about the status of AJ Brown. Like I said, he hasn't been playing the past couple of games. And there's 3 categories for a hamstring injury, okay? I put up 2 fingers. It's really 3 fingers, okay? A grade 1, 2, and 3. Now, grade 1 is generally just a strain, like tweaked my hammy a little bit. I tried running. You get a little twinge, and you're like, "Nyah!" And you kind of walk like you got to pull up your ass, right? And then you kind of like try to walk it out, and you're just like, "Oh, I'm gonna not run for the rest of the day." And then you ice it, take an aspirin or something, whatever it is that you do. Go to a doctor. Yeah, you pulled your hammy. You're getting older, right? Usually that takes a few days to heal. No more than a week. All right. Clearly, AJ Brown does not have that. Okay. If it was just a hamstring tweak, if it was just a hamstring injury, like a typical one, he'd already be able to play right now. He'd be running. He'd be doing all this stuff. So clearly, it's not a grade 1 injury. Okay. If it is a hamstring strain, which I'm going to assume it is from the outside looking in. Grade 2 and 3 are basically considered tears, okay? Now, whether it's the severity of the tears are different. Grade 2 is a partial tear, okay? And then grade 3, that's when you got a little bit more of a problem. Those are a little bit more of the, true hamstring tears. That's going to take a long time, okay? Grade 2 injuries, partial tear. I've had a partial torn hamstring before. Certainly not fun. It's not super debilitating in terms of your day-to-day, but you feel it. It lets you know that it's there. Okay. And for me, it was from a muscle imbalance that I was very quadricep and hamstring dominant when I was running. And a lot of athletes tend to be like that in general, which is why it's very common for runners. It's very common for track guys, very common for people who have to do a lot of running, like basketball, soccer, football, lacrosse. Those types of things, you're going to get a lot of hamstring injuries in these sports because a lot of the times people don't train their glutes. They don't train their butt muscles, right? That's kind of what, helps support your hamstrings. A lot of the work gets put there, and that's when the strains happen. That's when the tears happen. That's when the overworking and the overloading happen. That's why a lot of players, if they get hamstring problems, it can linger for a long time, i.e. Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's injury with his hamstring, it lingers for a very, very long time because he probably has muscular imbalances in his training and is probably not doing enough glute work and not doing enough, corrective skills in running, right? AJ Brown, I don't think is considered in that department quite yet because this is relatively new for him. This is not something he normally gets, but the fact that he got it now leads him to being more susceptible to it later on in his career, later on in the season, potentially, if this is not handled correctly. Now, from my opinion, because I am studying this as a PT student, physical therapist, and I know you don't associate that with doctorates, but we're doctors now. These hamstring injuries that AJ Brown has got, it sounds like a grade 2 strain to me, which means it sounds like a partial tear, which means it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks for it to heal anyway. And considering that we got the bye week coming up after this game against the Bucs, I don't believe you're seeing AJ Brown until after the bye week, if that. Okay? So it's very, very possible AJ Brown's going to miss. He missed the Falcons game. He missed the Saints game. Gonna miss the Bucs game. And maybe, just maybe, coming off of the bye, I think we play the New York Giants. I'm not 100% sure of the schedule off the top of my head. But he may miss that game too, depending on his recovery. So that's definitely something significant. And if it's a full tear and they're not being honest with the diagnosis, if they really believe that it's a full hamstring tear, AJ Brown could be out for months, like months. And we may not see him until like November if it's a true tear, which would be really, really unfortunate because he's a hell of a player. And quite frankly, this offense is just not the same without the dynamic player that AJ Brown is. It's not. So we hope that it's nothing of the sort. We hope it's nothing in regards to a full tear. I think it's a partial tear. I think we're not going to see him until after the bye. Maybe, just maybe, depending on how he feels, we may see him right after against Cleveland. That's what That's what I was pulling up, by the way. We got Cleveland coming after the bye in Cleveland. So maybe, just maybe, they'll wait until they come back to the East Coast. Who knows? All right, that's kind of how I would play it if I were them. You got a season-long trajectory here in an NFC that's relatively weak. I think you can afford to have AJ Brown rest up. However, the problem with that is Devonta Smith has sustained an injury. He got concussed in that Saints game. So now the thing you have to worry about in Philadelphia, or by Philadelphia management, is whether or not that Devonta Smith's injury is going to force the Eagles to increase that timeline for AJ Brown, or decrease it rather, and force him to play quicker than maybe they expected him to. And maybe, just maybe, he's going to be somebody who's like, I got to get out there for my guys. Devonta Smith's not there. And, Lane Johnson's not out there. I got to be out there. I got to be a leader, because that's who AJ Brown is. He's a leader. However, if the guy's going to be compromised, I'd rather get a 100% AJ Brown if later on in the season, even if we have to drop a couple of games, if it leads to that. I'd rather do that than put him out there at 80%, have him potentially sustain even more significant injury later on in the season, and then compromise what our ultimate goal is. Okay? So that's where I'm at with AJ Brown. But like I said, we're talking about Devonta Smith here. We know he got concussed on a very, very dirty play, that high-low hit that we saw, and he didn't return to the game. Now, thankfully, he was able to regain consciousness, because he looked like he KO'd on the field. He regained his consciousness. He was responsive relatively to the medical staff that was on the field at the time, and he was able to walk off the field and was brought to the tent and all that stuff. So in that sense, it's good. So we know that the concussion he sustained, because he lost a little bit of consciousness for a little bit of time. Like most of the time, these concussions, they get graded on a scale, and it's usually based on, like, I don't know, level of consciousness, or the amount of time that you have these symptoms for, at least immediately. You got grade 1, 2, and 3. Okay, similar to like a strain, similar to all these things, right? Because they try to make it consistent for these medical people, because it's a lot of stuff to remember. So I'm looking up. I have like the grade levels here just to give you an idea of what they mean here. So grade 1 is no loss of consciousness. Amnesia is absent, meaning like you're not forgetting things, right? Or present for less than 30 minutes. So again, I thought he KO'd. From what it looked like, I didn't get a great view of what we saw on the field. It looked like, because his helmet got taken off, it looked like he lost consciousness. I thought he KO'd. So I don't know if it's a grade 1, but grade 2 is described as a loss of consciousness for less than 5 minutes, or amnesia that's present for 30 minutes to 24 hours. I don't think he's suffering from amnesia. Maybe he is, based on, you ever get concussed on the field and they'll ask you questions. You're like, I don't remember getting my bell rung. I don't remember what happened. That's what they mean by the amnesia. Okay. So he lost consciousness for less than 5 minutes. Maybe, just maybe, if he did, you got a grade 2 concussion here. Now, whether or not it's a grade 1, grade 2, or grade 3, where you lose consciousness for more than 5 minutes, right? Or amnesia, you have 24 hours or more. That's like Tua Tagovailoa territory, okay? That's what that sounds like to me. But again, I don't think even Tua Tagovailoa has gotten a grade 3 concussion. But regardless, the point being is, we know he suffered a concussion, got KO'd, or looked to be KO'd, did not return back to sport, did not return back to the game. And He's getting evaluated by a neurologist over the week, and maybe he's already done it. Maybe he will do it today, tomorrow, whatever that time frame may be for him. He's going to go see a neurologist, to examine the head. They're going to get imaging done, and they're going to see how severe this concussion is, okay? And, you know, the thing with concussions is that it's traumatic. Concussions, I know they seem very normal in sports like soccer, lacrosse, and football. And we kind of just like, oh, concussions, and that's just part of the sport, getting your bell rung. But understand what is happening in a concussion, okay? Imagine this tennis ball in here, guys, is your brain, okay? Outside your skull. And you get tackled on a play, and your brain keeps getting knocked over on the sides of the skull, okay? I know it's not a great imagery of it right now, but like, think about your brain getting knocked back and forth in your skull every time you get tackled, every time you have whiplash, every time your head moves rapidly in a very dramatic fashion. Their brain is hitting the sides of your skull. That is the epicenter for everything you do. And when you get hit hard enough, you can get KO'd. You can start vomiting like Lane Johnson did, and we'll get to him later. It's a traumatic thing that happens over and over again in football. And people kind of brush it to the side. But when you get a concussion, and they talk about, oh, he's cleared by the doctors to play next week. I'll tell you this. To me, in my opinion, anybody who has a concussion in the sport of football or in the sport of soccer or lacrosse, if you get cleared to play in a week's time, I think that's irresponsible. Genuinely think it's irresponsible. I would never, as a soon-to-be doctor in physical therapy, as a professional, I don't think I would ever clear somebody to return to sport in a matter of 2 weeks. No way in hell. Let alone a week. Devonta Smith's concussion, and again, I'm not just saying, I tend to be conservative with concussions. I get that, but his injury in particular, guys, his concussion, you have to understand that like these concussions take some time to recover. And the way to recover is getting sleep, having like light aerobic exercise. So he's not even going to be, let's put it this way. If I'm a Philadelphia Eagles therapist, if I'm somebody on the medical staff in the NovaCare complex, and Devonta Smith is coming to me and he's saying, hey, what's the way to optimize my recovery here so I can get out on the field ASAP? I'd tell him this. You ain't playing against the Bucs. You're not doing anything until the bye week at minimum. You're not catching a ball. You're not going to look at like crazy lights on your phone. You're going to get a hell of a lot of sleep. And the exercise you're going to do is going to be swimming. You're going to do running on the treadmill, maybe walking. Very light shit. Very light stuff. I'm not doing anything intense with him just yet because there's stages in a recovery for concussion. Your rest period's the most important part for brain recovery, okay? It's your brain we're talking about here. Now, athletes tend to think in the very short term because they only have a small window of opportunity to go ahead and get their bread, to get their money. But long-term thinking-wise, you have to understand that if you don't handle a concussion properly in the short term, it can lead to fatal outcomes in the long term, as we all have seen, unfortunately. And we all see this with plenty of athletes. CTE is a big thing, but I don't think that's what's going on here for Devonta Smith, okay? So they don't have to worry about that right now if he handles this properly. And I know the NFL is trying to do things like putting on the Guardian helmets and all that stuff, thinking that's going to help. Let me tell you guys something. The Guardian helmet, the crap that you see like Jabril Peppers wearing, all this stuff, all the extra shit that they put on it, it does not change anything that happens inside your skull. Nothing changes inside your skull with a Guardian cap. I could put rubber padding on the outside of this tennis ball cover. If I move The tennis ball, if I move the casket back and forth, it's not changing the fact that this tennis ball is hitting the sides of my skull, regardless of the padding that I put on the outside. So think of the Guardian helmet in that sense. It's why you see a lot of the players in the NFL not even bother with the Guardian cap, because it's like, what exactly is this going to protect me from? I'm still getting my head rocked. That movement itself is going to bring my brain inside my skull. It's going to knock it up sideways. That's what's going to happen. Maybe it helps modicumly, right? In terms of like the initial impact from like maybe not avoiding for like not getting cuts or not getting, terrible bruising on the outside or things like that. A little extra padding there, but you're not preventing the car crash like impact every time a person plays football. It's not happening. And like I said, concussions, hell of a lot of rest, hell of a lot of sleep for Devonta Smith. And we got to make sure that he can actually balance, that he can actually track shit, that he can see, that he can remember things, that he's coherent, that he's clear when he speaks. All this stuff is going to be checked by a neurologist. All this stuff is going to be checked by any medical staff that goes ahead and sees Devonta Smith, which is why I don't believe you're seeing Devonta Smith for a long time. You're not seeing him against the Bucs. You're not seeing him at the bye. You may not even see him at Cleveland. Maybe even into the Giants game, potentially. Again, if he were in my care, I would give him a lot of sleep, limit his phone time, exercises is swimming, walking on the treadmill, riding a bike, anything that involves him being relatively stationary or not involving a lot of head movements. He's not touching a football. I wouldn't give him a football for like a couple of weeks. I would only have him do light exercise, and then if that's too easy for him, you can increase intensity by doing like combine drills, essentially. Like maybe you could do like cone drills. Maybe you could do like vertical jumps. Maybe you could do, non-contact drills involving Devonta Smith so that he still gets blood flow to his brain, because that's the way to recover with a concussion. You get a hell of a lot of rest because that's where your brain recovers in sleep. That's why sleep is so important for athletes. It's important for anybody. You want to improve your intelligence. You want to improve your cognition. You want to improve your ability to process information. Get some damn sleep. Get a hell of a lot of sleep and eat some damn sugars. Now, I don't mean go and eat a bunch of chocolate bars. I mean get your carbs in every now and then. Don't cut your carbs, because that's fuel for your brain as well. You need the glucose for that, for the cells in your brain to recover, okay? So I said he's not going to touch a football for a couple weeks. And when he does, he ain't catching a football on a route via a quarterback against the defense. He's throwing against air, stationary. Maybe he's got, I don't know what they call the machine where you stick the football in and it shoots at you. I guess you call it the shoots, but I guess that's really what linemen call the thing when you go underneath. Anyway, I'm showing my relatively novice football knowledge in terms of drills and all that stuff in that sense. My point being is, he ain't catching a football against the defense for some time. And until he's ready to do that on a consistent basis without getting dizzy, without losing consciousness, without getting, fog-headed, his vestibular system, his, balance system has got to be intact, and his ability to have good cognition and good memory and understand what he's asked to do has to be top-notch in order for him to be able to be cleared for the football field. And like I said, look, we all know Devonta Smith's a smaller guy. He's been durable a lot his whole career. But if you bring him back too quickly, if you bring him back prematurely, and he gets another concussion, God forbid, it could really, really be a problem. It could lead to things like Tua Tagovailoa's, the corrugate with the fingers and the flex posturing of his upper extremities, right? That type of stuff is, horrific to see. It's horrific to see. So listen, like he's getting eyed, he's going to get tracking, resting, swimming, walking, cycling. He ain't touching a football. He ain't seeing a football field until after the Cleveland game. If he's with me, in my care, he ain't seeing him until after Cleveland. Which now leads me to Lane Johnson, And I apologize if this is a little bit of a longer episode, but this is what I like to do. Okay. Lane Johnson. His concussion was a little bit more on the severe side, in my opinion, because once he got concussed, from what I've heard from other Eagle channels, from what I've heard from reports, he projectile vomited after he got hit in the Eagles game. If you're vomiting right off the rip, post-concussion, you got a pretty damn good concussion. You just do. And this, to me, Lane Johnson's concussion, that right there could be potentially life-threatening if you don't handle it correctly. Now, again, I preference all of this by saying I'm not a neurologist. I'm not an expert on concussions. I'm a DPT student. So I have an idea about concussion and concussion rehab and the effects of concussions. But in terms of the neurology specifics and all that stuff of what it looks like in imaging, not my forte. That's not my job description. Which is why he has to be seeing a neurologist frequently. His concussion, the projectile vomiting, again, remember, he was at the Superdome in New Orleans. All the lights, the noise, the constant action, getting put into the tent, change of stimulus, his balance, his ability to walk, all that gets affected when you get concussed. And when you get concussed like Lane Johnson, you're a big man making constant impact over and over and over again when you're a lineman. That's where most of these car crashes figuratively happen on a football field. You could be a running back and not get touched. You're a lineman, you're banging, you're smacking, you're hitting every damn play. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't avoid it. And a lot of the recovery stuff that we talked about with Devonta Smith, it's going to be similar for Lane Johnson, except I'm going to be a little bit more extreme in my care with Lane Johnson. If I'm giving Devonta Smith 3 to 4 weeks of rest, to me, Lane Johnson, I wouldn't put him back on a football field for a month and a half or 2. I need to be damn sure that if he gets his, if he makes contact with somebody and he gets a hit, that he doesn't get second impact syndrome, which is a condition where if you come back from a concussion prematurely and you get another concussion on top of that, when that previous one didn't recover, it could potentially be fatal. Like, you could be that messed up. And like I said, the severity of his concussion, all because of the projectile vomiting, the way he got hit, in the timing that he did, in the area that he did, right? It's not an easy injury. It's something that the Eagles organization, I hope to God that they are ultra conservative with this Lane Johnson injury, because this could potentially affect his functioning life if they don't handle this one correctly. Devonta Smith, I know I said the same thing, and it applies to Lane Johnson, but even more of an extreme degree. He is not seeing a football field, to me, 4 to 6 weeks minimum. And even then, I would probably try to push it as long as I can. Because, yes, you have Mekhi Becton, you have Tyler Steen and Fred Johnson there. They can hold down the fort for a little bit. And it's not like Lane Johnson, if you know he's healthy and he's ready to go, it's not like he needs time to be worked back into the system. He knows what he's doing. He's a Hall of Fame player. He's a great tackle in this football league. So it's not like he needs all of the reps all of the time. We need to make sure that Lane Johnson is genuinely okay. Because if he's not, God forbid, and you bring him back too early because you feel like your season's being compromised, then you may potentially affect this man's livelihood. And I don't mean on the field, I mean off the field. So it is ultra important that he gets the proper sleep, that he gets the proper rest, that he's not touching football, that he's not in a pair of pads, he's not doing any contact drills, he's not hitting anything. You got to play Lane Johnson's injury very, very carefully because it could be traumatic. You're making sure that he's getting a good heart rate when he's exercising, that he's getting enough blood flow to his brain to promote recovery, that he's eating properly to promote recovery, because you're not going to do heavy weightlifting with Lane Johnson. You can't. You're not doing that with concussions at the moment. You got to make sure that he's able to track stuff with his eyes, that he's able to turn his head properly. You're not doing all that stuff right off the rip. It's going to take a lot of time. So I know I sound like a broken record, but that concussion for Lane Johnson is severe. That is a severe concussion from the outside looking in. And if he sees a neurologist and the neurologist tells him, hey, you're good to go after a few weeks' time, then you know what? You can call me an idiot if you want in the comment section below. But I'm talking about long-term, post-football career, current football career. I would not put Lane Johnson back on a football field until basically Britton Covey comes back, which is 6 to 8 weeks. Like, he ain't seen a football field. And Devonta Smith, he's not seeing a football field for 3 weeks to 4 weeks. A.J. Brown, you ain't seeing him until after the bye week, maybe after Cleveland. Because if it's a partial tear for A.J. Brown, you need a lot of time to recover. If it's a concussion for Devonta Smith, I need to make sure that it doesn't lead to things like second impact syndrome. And for Lane Johnson, I need to make sure that when he's 100% ready to go back on the field, that I'm even more careful after that. Because one wrong slip up for a Lane Johnson concussion, the one we just saw, it could potentially be fatal. And I'm not saying that to be scary. I'm trying to be as honest as I can. You gotta make sure he is 100% ready to go, even if it means, God forbid, Lane Johnson, don't play football no more. It could cost you your life. If it comes to that, like it did with Chris Dealman a few years ago with Phillip Rivers, the guard against a really, really great, good football player for the Chargers, Chris Dealman. Remember the concussion he had? He got up and then he fell immediately back down, went to the neurologist, and they basically told him, like, hey, don't play football no more. Can't do it. And he had to retire right there. If unfortunately it comes to that point, that's what I would recommend Lane Johnson to. And I'm sure he's a smart guy. He's very, very intelligent. He's going to understand the sacrifices here. So we hope nothing like that is going to happen with Lane Johnson. God forbid. Again, I'm just more conservative when it comes to concussions. This type of stuff is definitely, my radars go up in regards to these types of injuries. A lot of muscle injuries like A.J. Brown, they got the best training. They got the best strengthening, some of the best diets. Those type of things can recover a little quicker than most people. Concussions, ain't nothing you could do to train to get more tolerant of a concussion. Just not. So we got to play that carefully. And even if it means that this season gets compromised, we'll take it. We'll take it on the chin for this season. So there's that. And I know, not the best ending, a little bit more of a somber note in terms of the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. But that's the injury report via Asif Body. Based on other reports, other findings, my observations from the game on Sunday and from the injuries that we saw with our Eagles players. And like I said, short-term sacrifice is going to bring on long-term success here, okay? And If it means Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown got to be out for the next few weeks, well, you know what? It'll give a chance for Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and Dallas Goedert to get on the same page again. Maybe get him in rhythm, get Jalen Hurts used to being able to read the offense without having to rely on Superman and Batman on the outside. Lane Johnson. We have Fred Johnson here. You got Tyler Steen. You also have Mekhi Becton, who can move to right tackle if need be. Take as much time as you need, my brother, to get your body right, to get your